All right.
Greetings, this is Dean Carpenter, Program Scientist of the Albemarle-Pamlico National History Program Partnership, aka APNEP. Welcome to the September presentation of the APNEP Science and Technology webinar series, sponsored by APNEP Science and Technical Advisory Committee, aka the STAC. Today's presenters will provide the audience with details about their water resources modeling careers, but know that Dr. Courtney Harris is a professor and chair of the Coastal and Ocean Processes section at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, or VIMS, one of our key partners. And that Dr. Harris' former postdoc, Dr. Dongxiao Yin, is a researcher at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. I wish to give a shout out to STAC Executive Board member, Dr. Donna Buklovic, for bringing their research to the STAC's attention. To encourage group exchanges, the presenters encourage the participants to ask questions as they move through their presentations. If we can, make those questions during the presentations ones of clarification, and reserve the more big picture kind of things for our discussion after the presentations. Note that this session is being recorded for later access by STAC members and other interested parties who could not join us today. Recordings of previous webinars in this series can be accessed by simply visiting the APNEP website, apnep.org, selecting the Resources tab on the homepage, then selecting the For Scientists tab. Now I will hand the virtual mic to Drs. Harris and Yin so they may begin their presentation. Welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Dean, for giving us the opportunity to present some of the work that we've been doing as part of an NSF-funded COPE project. So I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to give a basic introduction to what is the overview of our COPE project, including some of the work that a lot of our collaborators are doing, and kind of then highlight some of the work that our group at VIMS has been doing, which Dongxiao Yin will show some more of the details of the numerical modeling and analysis that he's done, because he's really led that effort to develop the numerical model. So as Dean said, I'm Courtney Harris. I'm a professor at VIMS. I've been here for about 25 years at this time, and my background is in numerical modeling, and usually I work on estuaries and continental shelves and think about physical oceanographic transport and sediment transport. So this project is the first time I've been working within the Pamlico in Albemarle-Pamlico Sound, but I've worked in other estuaries around the world. So the title of our talk today is Estuarine Exchange Flow, Salt Transport, and Salt Content Response in the Albemarle-Pamlico Estuarine System. And this is the title of a manuscript that Dongxiao has been working on, and he'll show you some of the more detailed methods and the approach, and then the results that he's getting from that model. So what I wanted to cover before I turn it over to Dongxiao was to give you a brief overview of the COPE project. It's my understanding that I think it might be really good for some of my co-PIs on the COPE project to maybe give a summary of their own work to STAC. But for today, I'll at least try to give you a brief overview of the scope and what all this project is encompassing. Within the COPE project itself, my group has been working on coupled numerical models within the project, and specifically, we are coupling a hydrodynamic model of the Albemarle-Pamlico and Neuse estuarine system with inputs from freshwater sources. So I'll show you a little bit more about our plans for that, and then Dongxiao will show you more the status of where he's at. And after that, I want to give you the longer term goals of what we hope to do with this estuarine modeling team. So right now, the estuarine modeling team from VIMS includes myself, as well as Dongxiao Yin. And then there's a PhD student, Dongyoung Baek, who plans to start working on this project. After I give you this overview, then Dongxiao will show you the work he's been doing to calculate estuarine exchange flow within the Albemarle-Pamlico estuarine system. And then I think that we'll have time for discussion to talk about either the details of the methods of how we're doing things, and also we're interested in APNEP's ideas about how this type of numerical modeling effort can tie into the goals of the APNEP. So first, a little bit about the COPE project. So COPE is an NSF-funded program. It stands for Coastlines and People. And there have actually been several COPE projects funded around the US. And so when I say I'm working on the NSF COPE project, I'm only working on one of them at this time, and there are lots of others. For example, there is one that's focused on the Virginia Barrier Islands, there are some focused on the West Coast coastlines, but this one was successfully funded. We worked on the proposal throughout 2019 and 2020, and then it was funded in the 2021 funding cycle. So it's a 5-year program, and the title of our proposal was Supporting Community Collaboration in Decision-Making and Environmental Justice in Eastern North Carolina. So the study area that was focused on by this project really is from the upper watershed along the Tar River out to the barrier islands on the Outer Banks. But a big focus of the communities that we've been working with on this project are along the Tar and Pamlico rivers. So some of our social scientist collaborators have been working with the communities of Princeville, Greenville, Hyde County, and out on the Outer Banks in Nags Head. So here I put a list of all of the PIs that were originally funded. We've had some personnel changes since 2021, but Stephen Moisey at East Carolina University is the lead PI of the project. But we have a lot of collaborators from ECU. So, and some of them actually aren't at ECU anymore, but they're still collaborating on the project. So Natasha Bell, Jacob Peterson-Perlman, Michael O'Driscoll, Rebecca Ash, Randall Etheridge, and Alex Manda are people at ECU. At VIMS, I'm the VIMS PI, and I've been working with former postdoc Dongxiao Yin and some collaborators that he's been working with at Woods Hole, and then now a PhD student, Dongyoung Baek. And so on this, I listed all the PIs just to give you an idea that this is a large project, and our part, the Estuarine model part that we're working on, is one part within a bigger project. I underlined the names of the PIs on the project that we're working with most closely. So Michael O'Driscoll, you're probably familiar with some of his work. He is leading the group to make measurements within the Tar-Pamlico system and help us get access to historical measurements. Rebecca Ash is a fisheries scientist at ECU, and she is interested in how estuarine dynamics may impact the habitat suitability of fish in the present day, but also going forward under projected scenarios. Randall Etheridge has been working with Venkat Lakshmi. Venkat is from UVA, Randall is at East Carolina, and they've been working with some PhD students to run SWOT models to give fresh water and nutrient inputs into the Tar and the Tar-Pamlico system, both under present day and then under future conditions on considering sea level rise and I think also projected land use changes. So we've been working with them because it's conducive to us to try to couple our hydrodynamic model of the estuary with projected changes to freshwater and nutrient inputs coming from the terrestrial and the fluvial systems. And then finally, the last person I have underlined on here is Alex Manda. Alex is at East Carolina, and he has been looking at salinity intrusion, especially in agricultural fields on kind of the Inner Banks region. So I wanted to show this to give you the overall title of the project and also, the scope, the number of PIs and co-PIs on the project, but then highlight the groups that our group is working most closely with. So a big part of the COPE project is called, Coastlines and People. And so a big part of what our project is doing towards linking our perceptions and our understanding of water issues is to develop communications and workforce development with the communities along the Tar-Pamlico. So I'm highlighting two efforts here on this slide. One is called the ECU Water Corps. So with the ECU Water Corps, I haven't been heavily involved in that, but my understanding is that they're taking student interns both from East Carolina and from other universities around the Eastern North Carolina region, and they're working with them to develop summer research projects and also to work to kind of translate the science back to communities through youth groups and through training sessions. The second thing I wanted to highlight is the Tar River Community Science Festival. So part of our scope within our COPE project is to try to communicate our science and our understanding of water issues back to the local communities. So towards that, the group has organized this coming up one in November 9th of 2024 will be the third annual Tar River Community Science Festival. So that is it's kind of an open house public outreach event that is held there along the Tar River in Greenville at the town common. And they have both speakers from academia talking about how their science translates to water quality issues. For example, last year they had speakers talking about contaminant transport within the estuaries, as well as agricultural runoff and the fate of that within the estuaries. And then they also had lots of tables where community groups could have exhibits and displays for hands-on activities that would attract people really from little kids up to people who were more the adult crowd who wanted to try to get more of an idea of the science. So right now, at this time now, it's early September, and so we're about 2 months out from our third Tar River Community Science Festival, and planning is underway to plan how that event will be. So if you're interested in that, if you have networks who might be interested in attending that, feel free to check it out and keep up to date on what is planned to do for that event. I think last year there must have been several hundred of the general public who attended that event. And then I think this is the last slide I have that shows the overall what's going on in the project. So this, the lead PI, Stephen Moisey, created this project map over the summer, and it's been really helpful to me since I'm such an estuary numerical modeler person. And there's so many other PIs on this project who do stuff that's, so different than me. This project map has really helped me keep in mind how the project is organized. So here, Stephen points out, he plotted it as a tree diagram where he's showing really three main prongs of the project. So the first one listed is the implementation team. So the implementation team is really in charge of working towards community engagement and participatory research. So those PIs and co-PIs are working with community groups within Princeville, Greenville, Hyde County, and Nags Head to kind of link our research with them. The second group is the community science team. So the community science team is working with developing the Community Water Corps youth group. So they are working with reaching out into the communities and finding people there who are interested in doing community science. And then this branch over here is the core research group. So that's where our group is within. So within the core research group, there's still three subcomponents of that. There's the social science research team, there's the monitoring team led by Michael O'Driscoll, and then there's the environmental modeling team. So in addition to the environmental modeling and monitoring that's going on, where we're getting measurements and developing numerical models of the way the environmental system will evolve, there's also a social science team who is going and looking at economics issues and societal issues and how those facets of the system may change in the future. So within the monitoring team, and the other thing on this project map, Stephen highlighted in yellow all of the things that are student projects. So the yellow indicates that there's a PhD or a master's student working on that component of the project. So within the monitoring team, Michael O'Driscoll is heading that, and our group has worked a lot with him because he is helping us get the data that we need both to run our model as model inputs as well as to test our model outputs. But our group is in the environmental modeling team. So within the environmental modeling team, there are three components. There's the estuary model that we're going to talk about today. There's the watershed model that's been run by Randall Etheridge and Venkat Lakshmi and PhD students working with them. And I'm going to show you a little bit about their work in just a minute. And then Rebecca Ash is working on a habitat assessment modeling. So again, she's a fisheries scientist, and she wants to kind of take what we are learning and understanding about how the estuaries will evolve and try and take that into consideration for how that will impact habitat. So this is an overview of the entire project team. And now I want to go a little more into what we're doing within the environmental modeling team. So a lot of our work has been focused on, or a lot of our work to date has been focused on salinity. And the reason for that focus is our collaborator, Michael O'Driscoll, has been analyzing conductivity measured at Washington, North Carolina. And so here he has a record, this is just for 2023. And so in 2023, he sees that when we're in low discharge, so the blue is the river discharge, and then the yellow is the conductivity measured at Washington. So he sees that during the times when the river is dry, that the conductivity increases. And the reason that that's of concern is because there's drinking water intakes there. And so as sea levels rise or as drought becomes more prevalent, there's a risk that the drinking waters could be compromised due to salinity intrusion. So what we wanted to try to do is to develop a numerical physical oceanographic model of the system to kind of be able to characterize how salinity is modified within the system, both in the present day as well as under future projections. But before we get into our estuary model, our colleagues who are doing the water modeling, the riverine modeling, Lakshmi and Etheridge, their PhD students have developed a SWOT model. So this is a recent publication from Mahesh Tapas, who recently got his PhD from East Carolina. And so Tapas used a SWOT model, which is a model that takes in as input precipitation, and then based on land use and other characteristics of the catchment, estimates both freshwater and nutrient discharges. So he published this paper where he's looking at the projections for how sea level rise might impact nutrient loading in the Tar-Pamlico system. So one goal of our group is to eventually be able to use the outputs from these SWOT models to account for what that's going to mean downstream within the estuary. So our group has been doing an environmental model of the estuary, and so this is a model grid that's showing the extent of the model, and the resolution I plotted on this grid is not as high as the grid actually is. I'm sure Dongxiao will show that, but our goals are to use this hydrodynamic model. So this accounts for wind forcing on the sound in exchanges between the sound and the ocean and freshwater inputs from the river, and account for that, use those physical processes to try to account for how upstream inputs, so eventually nutrient inputs, how does that impact downstream water issues? For climate links, how do climate and weather patterns impact water issues? So the water issues we're thinking about are salinity and nutrient cycling. So the approach that we've taken is to take an existing hydrodynamic model and improve it as we needed to, and then use it to evaluate the dynamics of salinity fluxes. So Dongxiao will show you where he's at with that. And then our future goals are to use the same model for forthcoming questions about nutrient inputs, residence time, and how the system will be modified under changing projections. So with this estuary model, we have hourly output available. Dongxiao has run a few years. It takes into account wind and atmospheric heat fluxes. The open boundaries are representing the larger Gulf Stream and Atlantic continental shelf. And then through that, we get exchanges at the inlets. The model itself at this time includes suspended sediment, waves, and wetting and drying. And the model that we have to date is using freshwater discharges that are scaled from USGS gauging stations. So our plans are to use the model to analyze salt exchanges. So that is what Dongxiao will be talking about today. We plan to use the model to also calculate and estimate residence times throughout the Albemarle-Pamlico estuarine system and its sub-estuaries. We want to develop a higher resolution model of the Tar-Pamlico that can be coupled to the SWOT runs that Mahesh Tapas has published. And then we want to use that to project salinity and nutrient distributions within the Tar-Pamlico for these future scenarios. But on top of that, these are all scientific objectives. We also, as part of the COPE project, it's important that we try to translate our scientific results into communication tools that can be passed on to and shared with communities. So that is what I had in my slides today. I guess I could, if there are a question, we could take that while we switch over to Dongxiao's more detailed discussion about the salt exchanges.
Thank you, Connie, for the introduction. Can you see my slide?
I do. It says new feature, like, or is that
Mhm.
me?
No.
Oh, mine has, I'm not used
Huh?
to WebEx. Now I see it, it's, yes, that looks good.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Connie, for the introduction. Thank you for the committee give us the opportunity to present our work. So, today I'm going to talk about the electric exchange flow in the Albemarle-Pamlico sound system. I'll refer it as APES. So this work was developed mainly looking at the physics behind it. But recently I've been really thinking about its implication and for biogeochemistry and for ecology. So for today, I would touch a little bit about the physics and kind of discuss with the audience here about how our model can be useful. Our conclusions can have implications for the biogeochemistry, for the ecology thing. So as Connie mentioned, I started looking at this system when I was a postdoc with Connie at VIMS. By that time, I was funded by the NSF COPE project at ECU. This May, I moved to Hui. And although I left the project, but I'm still working on the system. And at Hui, I work with John Warner, Dave Rossi, and Neil Ganch. They are my three major advisors. They have been really helping me to look at the to keep working on the previous thing I work on, but also look at the new things. So at Hui, I was supported by the Hui postdoc scholarship. So with this slide, I would like to mention two motivations when I looking at the system. So one motivation is the actually coast ocean exchange, and then also within the system, the change between different part of the system can be really important to the actual dynamics to biogeochemistry, but I think it's not really much started, at least for this system. So this is the actual exchange flow work I'll be present today. The second motivation is that when we look at the ungauged area in this drainage basin, so here is the ungauged area. The first thing is that it's really large. It takes accounts 37% of the drainage basin. So one thing, it's really large. The other thing is that the dynamics, the ecology can be really important and different in the ungated area compared to the upstream gated area. For example, the carbon and also the issues, salt intrusion in the coastal agriculture land can be really different, but really important. That's the ongoing work I'm working at whole to look at the interaction between estuary and coastal wetland and farmland. So for today, as I said, I'll focus on the exchange flow. So, what is exchange flow? Here, I give you a brief concept of exchange flow. Let's look at the picture on the left. So, for a typical estuary, there is the river input, bring fresh water from upland. Also, at the mouth of the estuary, there is tidal processes, wind processes, bring water from ocean into the estuary, and also takes water from estuary out of the ocean. So, the basic balance is Q out equals Q in and the river. So two things that I want to make, two things that remind us that exchange can be important is in terms of magnitude. The Q in can be really many times larger than Q river. This means that it can have a much larger impact on residence time and flushing. Those things are really important for biogeochemistry, for ecology, for fisheries. The second thing is that the Q in not only brings the water, but also brings a lot of other things. The salt, heat, nutrients, and phytoplankton, oxygen, those are all the things. So those things, if they are much bigger, they can dominate the budget and then affect the coastal problem we are seeing at APES. For example, the dissolved oxygen, and then the fish habitat change, these things. So that's why we look at the exchange flow. So to quantify exchange flow, we use the thing called the total exchange flow framework, which is proposed by Mike Grady. The major idea is that given a transect in the estuary, whether it's at the mouth or whether it's inside the estuary, we can calculate two things. First is the inward transport and outward volume transport. The other thing that's important is that we can also calculate the tracer concentration. The tracer can be salinity, can be nitrogen, can be dissolved oxygen. So basically quantifies the flux. So because we first look at the physics, so I want to give you an overview of the physics behind the exchange flow. So I want to go in detail about that, but the major idea is that exchange flow can be controlled by different forcings, and corresponding to the controlling forcings, it have like different scalings. Here I labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, and so when we look at the physics, we try to figure out what's the major forcing behind this exchange flow, what control them. That's really important. So to use exchange flow to study the system, we use a modern framework called COAST, which is mainly developed by John Warner at USGS. So I want to give a brief view of a COAST framework, and then it is the 3D baroclinic model at source temperature. In terms of physics, it includes wave, sediment, vegetation, and also biogeochemistry. And vegetation, it has wetland, marsh things, and also has hydrology and atmosphere. So for our efforts in Pamlico Sound, so we have different levels, or we use different levels of models. First, we have a big model on the left. You can see the US East Coast model cover the US East Coast. It has a resolution of 500 kilometers. Rooming into the Albemarle Sound, we have different levels of models. On the blue box is level 1 model. We have 500 meter, and level 2 have 200 meter model to look more at the physics and at the inlet dynamics. And also we have a small model, high resolution model over the Pamlico River. Here is the red box here. It's a high resolution model. Right now we look at mainly the couple with swatch as Courtney Mason and then the saltwater intrusion. Okay, so with the model and total exchange flow framework, so we select several inlets that we think are important to quantify exchange flow. First, at 3 inlets. Here, at 3 inlets, we have 3 transects to quantify the exchange between the Sound and the ocean. Also, we have 2 transects at tributary estuaries to mainly look at the exchange between the lower Pamlico Sound and tributary estuaries. And also we have a transect at Albemarle Sound to look at the exchange between Albemarle Sound and other part of the system. Okay, So first, I will give a brief touch on the physics. We look at our conclusions. So I want to give you a detail about that, but so we really spend a lot of time on it, and then yeah. So use all critical inlets as example. The top panel shows the time series of the total exchange flow represented by Q in and river represented by the black line. So and the bottom panel gives you idea of the physics behind it. So the major idea is that there are two processes that control the exchange flow in the inlet. One is delta H to delta T, which means the temporal variation with the residual water level. The other mechanism is the tidal prism. So those two um, forcings work together to control the exchange flow, the volume transport, the exchange between the Albemarle Sound and the coastal ocean. So the other is the tributary estuary. I use the Pamlico River estuary as the example. It's same to the News River estuary. So in the Pamlico River estuary, we found that the important thing is the local wind. So the VE here square is the wind speed. So we found that it's wind streaming that really controls the exchange flow. So over Albemarle Sound, so the controlling mechanism here is temperature variation of the delta H, which is the residual level. Let's move the water in and out of the estuary and control the exchange flow. Okay, this is the physics, and then I would like to, so based on our calculation of exchange flow, I want to move from the physics and to give some implication of the exchange flow to biogeochemistry. First, I want to compare the actual exchange flow with river discharge. So yeah, first we look at the outlet, the inlet, the three inlets. So the top right panel shows the exchange flow Q in. Q in here is the sum of the three inlets, basically how many waters bring into the estuary. And it compared to the river. The river is the sum of all four rivers that bring water into the estuary. We consider ungated area as well. We can see that the exchange flow is much larger than the river. The box plot here show the ratio between exchange flow and the river. So this reminds us that exchange flow can really important to control the residence time and flushing and have a much larger impact than river, at least at short time scale. Then we look at the two tributary estuaries. One is the Pamlico River on the top panel. There are the News River on the bottom panel. We found similar things. The Q in the orange line, the exchange flow referent, is much larger than the river input, which is the black line here. So also it applies to the tributary estuaries. I think that might give us a reminder that the exchange between the lower Pamlico Sound and the tributary estuary can really have maybe like underrated impact on the problem here in the tributary estuaries. It's same for the Albemarle Sound. When we compare the exchange flow and then the river discharge, we found the exchange flow is really much larger than river discharge. So by comparing the exchange flow and river discharge, we think that maybe that the exchange flow and the material transport associated exchange flow can have a more important effect, at least for sure, residence time and flushing, and maybe other budget, like nutrient budget on the sound and on the tributary estuaries on the sub-basin of the system. Yeah. Then I want to show you our results on salt content. First, we look at the year of 2022. So on the right panel is the series of the volume averaged salinity of different part of the system. We have APES represents the whole system. Albemarle Sound, which is here. The blue line here is the Albemarle Sound. News River estuary, and then Pamlico River estuary. So when we look at the two time series, one thing is that when we look at the y-axis, the Albemarle Sound is much fresher than the other part of the system. This is really already well known and in this system. Another thing is that we can clearly see the seasonal change of the salt content. move from salt content to salt content, let's see the stratification component associated with salt contents. So here we look at 2 time points. So one is during April 26, when the salinity of the APES, here the black line, is at its minimum. And then the second is November 12th, when the salinity is at its maximum. We see that when the salinity is at a minimum, the stratification is really large. But when it's at its maximum, the stratification is not that much. So when we move from April in November, we expect to see increased stratification, and then during this period, that's when the dissolved oxygen problem, the hypoxia problem, happens over like the tributary estuaries. So we believe our model results, at least on stratification, can give some implication on the physical factors that controls the dissolved oxygen problem in this area. Also, the salt content change maybe have some, and then the salt intrusion change we are looking at now can have important impacts on the fish habitat change. Yeah, and then we move from the one single year to multiple years. This is the recent results I got the simulation from the year 2020 to 2024. The reason why we select 2020 to 2024 is when we look at the time series discharge, the bottom left, we see from 2020 to 2024, the discharge really decreased a lot from very wet year in 2020 to a very dry year to 2022. So we are interested about the salt content change. So on the right panel shows the salt content change. So one thing that I want to highlight here is from 2020 to 2023, we have really increased, we have a big increase in salt contents. For example, if we look at the black line, the whole system, in 2020, it's almost 8, but by the end of 2023, at around 20, it's more than doubled. So we think this is a huge change. And then we are really interested in if there is some like some biogeochemical or salt marshes or coastal agriculture influence related to the salt content increase. It's a big increase for us. So then I would like to show you the variation. The reason the variation with the salt content, the reason we look at the salt variation because we think that not only the magnitude is important, but the variation is really important, and at which time scale it varies. It's also important because we think some species are really sensitive to salt content and some are not. And then we did a wavelength power analysis. The top right panel shows the result of wavelength power analysis. The major idea is that when we look at the blue line in comparison to other lines, we found that at short time period, by short time period we mean less than 20 days, we see significant change only at albumin zone. This means that the albumin is really sensitive to short-term change in terms of forcings. The reason for that is that when we look at the box plot here on the bottom right, is that the estuary adjustment time of albumin zone, which use the left axis, is on the order of several days, but other parts of the system is on the order of 100 days, so it's much longer. So with the last slide, I want to highlight our ongoing work. So the ongoing work is focused on the interaction between ungated area on the coastal farmers and coastal agriculture work mainly with new here and then Dave. So as a first step, we develop a hydrological model and the Dwarf Hydro for the ungated area. This is a snapshot of the model domain Dwarf Hydro we are currently developing. We really want to look at how the ungated area might be different and they might contribute to the estuary, and then how the estuary might affect the ungated area, for example, the salt marsh and then the boundary exchange. So to summarize, and the two major things I want to highlight is that this system is really unique. So the reason why it's unique is that the mechanism controlling the exchange flow is really different at a different part of the system, and also it's really different when we consider different time scales. So the other thing is that I want to discuss with the audience here is that when we really look at the estuary clean flow, especially when we really compare that with the river discharge, we found it's really much larger than the river flow. No matter in the inlets, no matter when we look at the mouths or tributary estuary, it's really many times larger than the river flow. So only consider the magnitude, we think it might have a large impact on the the process in tributary estuary in the sound. So, but I think it's really overlooked by previous efforts. I think that might be something we can really pay attention to in the future. But this is just an implication. Yeah, I would like to get the input from the audience. So with this, I would like to acknowledge the efforts I got from my colleagues, ECU COPE modeling and monitoring team, Stephen Moshe and Michael Driscoll from ECU, Dr. Hans Parzo Lab for providing us the observation data to validate the model, and Dave Hoffman and Susan for giving us the observation data to validate our model. Also, Jillian and Christy from UW, and at Hui, I also discussed a lot with Rocky Guire. So with this, yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, both Drs. Harris and Yin, on your presentation, and I guess we'll open it up to the audience. Are there any questions?
Hey, Dean, this is Judd.
Hi,
Can you
Judd.
hear me? Hey,
Yes.
first of all, thanks for interesting but very complicated seminar. Takes a while to wrap your head around it, but my question is, why didn't you have exchange flow relationship between Albemarle Sound and Core Sound? So I know you've got the primary inlets between the Atlantic and Pamlico Sound and then the rivers, but how come you didn't include exchange between Core Sound and Pamlico Sound?
Which sound?
Just south of Ocracoke Inlet, where the very southeastern portion of Pamlico Sound connects to Core Sound, another large body of water to the south of Pamlico Sound. I noticed you didn't have any exchange flow. Yeah, I'm not sure I can see your.
Can you see my slides?
Yeah, I can see your slide. You see where the
Did
O
you talk about this?
You mean down
Here?
near the inlet down near Beaufort, or?
No, do you see
Here?
the O where Ocracoke Inlet is?
Yes.
Here? Oh,
So-
here. You mean here?
Yeah, right there. Are you including all?
Here.
You don't. I notice you don't have an exchange flow there.
Yeah, we don't really. I don't really. Yeah, I'm not sure.
The
Yeah,
model not high enough
we
resolution?
didn't really calculate that. We didn't really calculate that part. Yeah.
That's a pretty significant connection right there between those two water bodies, and we know from experience that Core Sound is very much influenced by the conditions in Pamlico Sound, especially the water level setup and how the tides respond there. So I was just curious why you didn't incorporate that.
Yeah.
It's like
that's a good point. Yeah,
I think a big inlet there.
Yeah.
Connecting
That's a good point.
two sounds.
Yeah, we'll have to look at how the model resolution compared to the scale. So what is Dongxiao, what's the horizontal resolution of the model?
We have 500 meters. I think we don't have a problem to look at that. But the reason why we don't look at that, yeah, because we focus on the like the tributary estuary and then the overall picture. Yeah, we didn't really look at that because we didn't find like a big river or like a major inlet out there. Yeah, but we can definitely do that in the future. That's no problem. Yeah.
Yeah, because in the wind setups, it's almost, you can imagine there's almost unidirectional flow coming southeast from Pamlico Sound into Core Sound, and then I don't know about the other
mean,
direction, but there's a
yeah.
huge amount of exchange there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah. Yeah, we can definitely look at that in the future. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Dean, so this is Wilson. Thanks for the presentations, Courtney and Dongxiao. And I think, I'll just ask the question. So my interests are very similar to Rebecca Ash's interests. And I'm sure Judd also, both of us would be interested in how these salinity changes over time will affect both SAV and fish and invertebrates that occupy the rivers and the sounds, and also how the salinity changes, could possibly affect migration of the diadromous species that live in the ocean most of the year and then occupy, in the case of eels, occupy the rivers and sounds and estuaries as nursery areas, whereas the rest of the species, come up river to spawn in those rivers. So I don't know, is there the possibility for getting a maybe an additional webinar that at which Rebecca could speak about what the work that she's doing and how she plans to use the modeling to apply to species distributional changes and habitat use changes. And the one thing that occurs to me is that you could plug in habitat suitability index model and possibly model the changes in occupancy. I don't know, that maybe that's the sort of thing she's looking at, but I'll shut up and let you answer my rambling question here.
Yeah. Do you want to take that one, Dongxiao, or do you want me to? Am I muted?
You can.
Okay. Yeah, I think
first.
that
Okay,
is
I don't-
exactly along the lines of what Rebecca is hoping to do with this, with the model, is especially once we have models for future scenarios to compare the habitat suitability. And we're focusing on salinity here, so compare the habitat suitability under present day compared to future. So yeah, she was hoping to be able to call in today to listen to our talk, but she had a scheduling conflict, and I think she would definitely be interested to talk to the APNEP stack about her plans.
Okay, we have a couple more questions here. Michelle?
Yeah, thanks. Great presentation, Dongxiao. Can you, I guess, going back to that salinity graph you just had up there,
Oh.
I had a question about it if you do want to bring it up again. But I was wondering if you, what's that?
Okay. I thought I was still sharing it.
Yeah, we're not sharing right now.
No, sorry about that. I see
It's
it
all
now?
good. Yeah, so I was just curious, and I know we only go back to 2020, but is there any thought on what the drivers were for? I'm just thinking about the recent accelerated sea level rise and water levels published for the last decade. Is that the driver, or what is the driver for the increase in
Yeah,
salt
definitely.
content?
Definitely, I think it's one driver might be the river input is decreasing. You see, this is the river discharge from 2020 to 2024. It's really a sharp decrease, right? In terms of sea level rise, we have to look into that. We need to pull out the data to see if there is a residual water level increase. Yeah.
That's over the 4-year time scale of this model, but Michelle, are you talking about longer term than 4 years?
Oh, yeah. Do you have a similar result over a longer term?
Well, we
It
haven't
seems
run
like
we haven't run this model over longer term, but I thought that there
Okay.
were
No,
so
not yeah. I thought the multiple year is long enough for me. It's really take Yeah, I just got it last week. The 4 years. It's really long enough for me already. Michelle. That's takes a lot of computation time for me to do that. Yeah.
But
Yeah, but
Yeah, no, I
yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
yeah,
oh no, I get that. It would be to know if there was like a 15 or 20-year trend, or if that's just kind of an anomaly over the last 4 or 5 years. Maybe there's a
Yeah.
supercomputer out there. Yeah. No.
Yeah, sure. We can definitely do that. And I will need to talk with John because I'm using John's big model for boundary. And we are currently having some, because there is shutdown back to 2020, we missed some boundary data, so we cannot have boundary there. We need to fix that before we go to, like 20 years. Yeah, but I think that's a great question. We really want to look at the, like the long-term trends in sea level rise, how to represent how that affects the salt content. But before that, if there is some salinity observation data for 20 decades, for us to validate the hypothesis to say, oh, for the last 20 decades, we do see some trend of salinity from the observation data, that will, motivate us more to do that. Yeah. We hope there is one thing I want to point out, that we really need the data, observation data in this area to validate our model. Yeah. We hope to get some, idea from the audience, where can we find the data. Yeah.
and I thought that
Thank-
Michael O'Driscoll was looking at the longer time scale salinity or conductivity observations in the more upstream, what to me are the more upstream portions, and also looking at the longer term sea level trends from measurements. So what we're doing is looking at how salinity is distributed within the estuary, but I think that there are studies trying to relate longer timescale salinity trends to riverine inputs and sea level at the coast.
Okay, got another question from Dan.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Courtney and Dongxiao. Really interesting presentation. And I'm working with a group where we're looking at cyanobacteria blooms and toxins throughout the sound. And I'd love to talk with you all more in the future because we're really interested in some of these salinity and hydrodynamic questions. So we'll probably reach out at some point soon. But my first question was going to be about the calibration data. If you had calibrated it, and you mentioned that you were looking for data. I think there is a fair amount of data from the NCDEQ ambient monitoring program, because they monitor up and down the Pamlico River estuary and also sometimes in the Albemarle. And we've actually been analyzing some of that data, and it's got pretty good coverage for like over a decade. And I'd be happy to like point you in that direction. They may also have fairly regular sampling up and down the Albemarle as well, although that might not be as complete. But I think in terms of a question, you had mentioned that the Albemarle, it seems to it had a quicker response time, and I was wondering, do you attribute that more to the more dynamic river inflows and shorter hydraulic residence times relative to those inflows, or is that more of a more dynamic mixing from the greater Albemarle-Pamlico system, out into the ocean? I was a little surprised that that responds quicker, because I generally think of the Albemarle as like more secluded, right? Like it doesn't have as much exchange with the ocean.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Dan. So for first question, we did get I think 2 years observation data from NCDEQ for 2021 and 2022. That's 2 years data we get, and then validate our model. You see, I presented mainly on 2022 because we have data available to validate our model for that year and afterward. So yeah, it would be nice if we can get a longer time series observation, so we can like use it to validate the model to do a longer run, as Michelle mentioned. Yeah, we can definitely talk maybe some other time, talk
Yeah,
about
sure.
it. Yeah,
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 I know their data set goes back, at
yeah,
least a decade, maybe a couple decades. So
yeah.
happy
That
to
will be
talk more
awesome.
about that later.
Yeah, and also for the yes, for the second question. So I'm talking about here is astral adjustment time, the salinity adjustment time. So the idea of adjustment time is that for example, we have an initial condition with salinity, and then if there is a change in forcing, how the how long it will take for the salinity to respond to the for the new salinity to respond to the forcing. The reason why the Albemarle sound have a much shorter response time is that you will see the salt plume really penetrates really close to the mouth. It's not really further into the sound. So the salinity adjustment time Albemarle sound, that's why it's really shorter. But in terms of residence time, when we talk about residence time, I would say, especially when we talk about the what materials bring in by the river, it should be much longer. So it's two different concepts. One is adjustment time, salinity adjustment time. One is the residence time. So it's yeah, that's the thing that I think Courtney pointed out. That's the thing we are going to look at. I assume that the residence time in Albemarle Sound is much longer, but the adjustment time is shorter. Yeah, especially when it adjusts to the open forcing, to the open boundary forcing. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. They're two different things. I feel like they should
Yeah,
be related, and I guess I look forward to seeing
yeah,
what y'all come up with as you look into that more.
yeah,
But yeah, I think that generally answers my question. I guess just
yeah,
kind of related to that, I was wondering, I think, you showed, that at these particular locations, I'm assuming it's a particular location, that the exchange with the sea is much more influential in terms of flows than the river flow, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
I'd imagine there's like a spatial gradient with that, and as you move further and further up these estuaries, that the river becomes more and more dominant. And I think it would be really cool if there was like a way to visualize that. Like, could you kind of spatially map, like, how the relative influence of one versus the other over the sound? Because I mean that could provide I could see that being really valuable and trying to like understand, where there might be water quality issues like more associated with the river versus, the other factors. It's just a
yeah,
thought.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. A lot of people have been doing that. So in like typical estuaries, for typical estuary, maybe like Chesapeake Bay, if there is only one mouth. But for yeah, but I think we can find a way. We may be able to find a way to do that in Albemarle Sound. It has three inlets. One complicated thing of the Albemarle Sound, it has three inlets, right? We don't know like the proportion of the river, the fresh water goes from each inlet. We need to figure that out before we come out to the transects of like for example, the proportion of the exchange flow and the river. We don't know how much river goes out of the Ocracoke inlet, how much river fresh water goes into the like Oregon inlet. That's the thing I think we need to figure out. Yeah, and then we can generate a transect from the inlet all the way to the tributary estuary to see the distribution of the ratio of the exchange flow and the river. I think that's important. And then once we get that, I think we can look more into the physics, into the mixing, and into the like how important exchange flow compared to river. I think that's a good point. Yeah,
Yeah, thanks. Really interesting.
yeah.
Look forward to
Uh,
chatting more sometime.
Sure, of course, of course. Thank you.
Dean, I think you're muted. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I just said thank you, and I don't see any other hands raised, and we're just a little bit over time. So, are there any like one more pressing question before we conclude? Okay. Well,
All
hearing
right.
hearing none, I want to thank the presenters, Dr. Harris and Dr. Yin. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it and appreciate your interest in our system and studying here. And we look forward. I am sure that our partnership representatives from our partnership will have more interactions with you folks, especially if you continue doing research down in our part of the area. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks for
Thank you.
this opportunity.
Thank you, Rodney. Bye.
Thank you. Nice.